This is an introduction to the Meramec River Recreation Association, a stakeholder group formed in 1975 to protect the lower 108 miles of the Meramec River near St. Louis, Missouri. A recreation association sounds like a lot of fun, but maintaining the river in a condition to play there is a lot of work. From the very beginning of the Meramec Canoe Company at Valley Park and Stites Beach just down the hill from Kirkwood, most recreation along the Meramec has required one piece of equipment, a paddle. In the 1800s, the Meramec was a working river. It was a way to transport people upstream and goods and natural resources coming down, things like lumber, ore, and other goods being taken to the city. It also was a source for sand and gravel for the roads and for construction. By the end of the century, it became a destination for well-to-do people looking to get out of the city and break the heat during the humid Missouri summers. By the 1904 World's Fair, even people of modest means could afford a railroad ticket to come out to Lincoln Beach or one of the other places along the Meramec where they could spend a day or a weekend. Some people even took their families out there for the entire summer, and the gentleman of the house would commute into the city during the week and then rejoin his family on the weekends. All was not sweetness and play along the Meramec, however. In August of 1915, one of the periodic but very severe floods affected the lower basin. The records from that flood stood for 100 years until the December-January flood of 2015-2016. The same towns flooded back then, such as Valley Park, Eureka, Pacific, have seen the brunt of the Meramec at its most destructive stages. Meramec means the river of the ugly fish. It contains at least 4 species of catfish, from very small to quite large. The name originated around 1700 when Father James Gravier and some French voyageurs entered the river at its mouth with the Mississippi and came upstream at least as far as the confluence with the Big River, which at that point was called the Black Fork. Father Gravier explained in his report that up that river were the lead mines of the French. He called the river either Miramagua or Maramigua, depending on the spelling, and put it down on the maps as such. Unfortunately, the English were nowhere as literate as the French, and somewhere along the line, that word became corrupted into Meramec. For the next 50 years, the Meramec River was the destination of choice for people wanting to get out of the city for the day, enjoy their Sunday, stay cool, get wet, have a picnic. And it was so popular that one of the St. Louis newspapers, the St. Louis Times, decided to offer lots as a perk for people who had taken a subscription with their newspaper. As roads got better and automobiles became more common, the Meramec River Valley became even more popular. It was a mere 60 to 70 years ago that people would drive out for camping and fishing and canoeing. The picture at the upper left is taken near Pacific in the 1940s. The one at the lower left in Fenton in the 1950s. And the one to the right is along the river at Valley Park. Meanwhile, the river deteriorated. People built nice river cabins, which were turned to shacks by the beating and the coming and the going of the flooded Meramec. The person who had a nice lot to drive out to for a picnic on Sunday saw his lot erode away, fall into the river, and he dumped abandoned cars against the bank with the hope of stabilizing it. Even the sand and gravel companies, who had a bigger investment, left their boats and their barges smashed into the banks when they did not feel that it was advantageous to retrieve them. Plans were made through the entire 20th century to dam the Meramec. The set of plans which got the furthest was one to build 31 dams along the Meramec, the Big, and the Burbus rivers, with the main stem dam at Sullivan. This is a map of the Meramec River downstream from Sullivan all the way to its confluence with the Mississippi at Flam City. Even had the dam been built, this was to remain a free-flowing stream. However, a federal study indicated problems along the way and proposed ideas on how to better manage it. The colored sections along the river indicate major creek watersheds providing input into the main stream. 1965 was a watershed year for the lower Meramec, especially St. Louis County and Jefferson County. The Open Space Council of Greater St. Louis and the East-West Gateway Council of Governments were both formed. St. Louis County Parks took up the challenge of acquiring parkland along the Meramec River to protect it and to use it as an outlet, a place for the river to go during flooding. The Open Space Council of Greater St. Louis took early responsibility for cleaning up the riparian corridor along the Meramec. Using citizen volunteers, they could accomplish what no one city or county could. They would negotiate with the cities and counties for in-kind assistance in removal of the trash, tires, and other debris which were brought to a central location by the volunteers. This partnership has been in existence for over 50 years. It now extends the entire length of the river up to Crawford County and is a great success every year. The lower Meramec historically has had a bad flood in the St. Louis area about every 10 years. What's making this worse recently is the frequency and the intensity of these flood events, originally described as happening only 1% of the time, has now increased and continues to increase. We have had 700-year floods since 1958. Since World War II, the Meramec Valley near St. Louis has become increasingly urbanized. With the completion of I-44 in 1972, that process increased tremendously because it was now an easy commute into jobs in the city. It took only 10 years of urban sprawl to have the brand new I-44 highway go underwater in December of 1982. During the time period from 1950 to 2020, approximately 250,000 people have moved into the river basin on all sides. In 1975, the proponents and opponents of the Meramec Dam were beginning to take up sides. Along the lower river, the question was different. Would there even be green space left for people to play in? Large tracts of land, some of them dating to the previous century, were beginning to be subdivided for industrial, residential, and commercial purposes. One of the first tracts preserved along the Meramec was that of Lincoln Beach, which became Castlewood State Park in 1974, anticipating many other parks along the river to come. As the Open Space Council and other groups cleaned up old river shacks, the land they sat on was often purchased with land and water conservation funds, transferred to the local municipality, and used as wetlands, floodways, golf courses, and for other purposes where an occasional dunking would not become an issue. Even after Governor Christopher Bond created the Lower Meramec River Recreation Area, skeptics were many. People did not believe that a river, which had been used as a local dump site, could ever truly be cleaned up enough to fish, swim, and hold picnics along. At the same time, how could that ever be made into an economic benefit for the area? A committee of representative stakeholders was appointed to oversee the project, and this committee grew into the Meramec River Recreation Association. A master plan for a river can be very challenging, especially when there are no funds specifically dedicated to the project of managing that river. Various organizations, the East-West Gateway, Council of Governments, St. Louis County Parks, and now the Great Rivers Greenway, all have plans in effect for what they would like to do. The cities along the river have their own agendas, and yet everyone seems to sit down at one great big table and come up with a project and an outcome that all can live with. As the lower river began to be seen as a long green park, a Meramec Greenway, the idea of linking each of these parks together with a system of trails for hiking and biking became paramount. Vision was put together 44 years ago to have one long green snake from Sullivan to the Mississippi, and that particular vision is still in effect today. It's still being worked on, and now, and since the year 2000, this system of greenways has been supported by a tax voted for by the people of St. Louis County, and St. Charles County in order to create a network of trails along the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Meramec, and a number of the larger creeks and tributaries in the area for walking, biking, hiking, and just getting outside in nature. Great Rivers Greenway coordinates the efforts through these three counties, and it's expected as other nearby counties urbanize, they may wish themselves to be added to this system. It takes many partners to manage the Meramec River. The Open Space Council is the granddaddy of them all, 10 years older than the MRRA, and they've been the leader on Meramec cleanups, riparian corridor maintenance, and water quality issues since 1965. Missouri Stream Teams, who were formed in 1989, have picked up a lot of trash and done a lot of water quality studies along the Meramec. The stream is in the backyard of many of their volunteers. East-West Gateway Council of Governments has to take the river, flooding, and other issues into consideration when they put out a county plan for any particular area. It's not just us, it's everyone working together to make certain that the Meramec thrives. The MRRA is a place to talk. It's a place where representatives from federal, state, local, county level, and even citizens can come together to get answers to questions related to the management of the river, the technical aspects of the river, how to deal with certain problems which are caused by the river, and also to come together to celebrate the good things that are happening, such as the fact that there are fewer tires being pulled out of the river this year than there were last year. Everyone has got one goal in mind, and that is to clean up the river, to manage the river so that we can live with the river, to get out of the way of the river when we need to, and to make the river work for us instead of being an unknown factor out there beyond our control. Our current members of the Meramec River Recreation Association are many people and organizations you would think. The Missouri Department of Natural Resources, state parks, conservation, counties, cities in the Meramec Basin, NGOs who help us greatly. But one of the unique things about the MRRA is we have up to 9 citizens who serve for a 3-year term each, 3 each from Jefferson, Franklin, and St. Louis counties. And these are simply people who love the river, who care about the river, and are interested in the river enough to make time out of their day to come and provide input to the members whose job it is to take care of the river. This is a list of our current partners. Some, like the Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Geologic Survey, are fairly permanent partners. Others are organizations which may come and go. However, we all have the common goal of helping the Meramec, getting the Meramec into the best shape it can, and working with the local agencies and local government officials who can actually do something about making some of this come true. It takes a lot of work to keep a river fun. Thanks to many partners, together we get the job done.